Chapter 1. The two-part sleep, a forgotten night ritual. Loft fire crackles. Slow ambient tones hum beneath the voice. Before the age of electricity, when night truly meant darkness, humanity lived by a rhythm now almost completely forgotten. We call it the two-part sleep, a pattern of rest that once shaped every household, every village, and every dream. It was not strange. It was not seen as broken or irregular. For countless generations, it was simply the way human beings slept. Picture a medieval winter evening. The sun has long since vanished below the horizon. The fields are silent, the air crisp and cold. Inside a small wooden cottage, a family sits close to the hearth, their faces lit by the soft gold of a dying flame. There are no clocks to mark the hours, no humming of machines, no glow from distant towns, only the steady rhythm of fire and breath. They have eaten, prayed, and spoken softly about the day. One by one, they settle onto straw beds or simple wooden frames covered in wool and linen. Outside, the wind sighs against the walls. The only light left in the world flickers from the hearth. Soon they drift into their first sleep. This first sleep was heavy, deep, dream-filled, a time when the body gave itself entirely to the night. Historians believe it lasted roughly 4 hours, perhaps from 9 in the evening until around midnight. Then, like clockwork, though no clock existed, something curious happened. They woke, not all at once, not with shock or noise, but gently, as if drawn out of slumber by an unseen tide. One person might stir, another shift beneath their blanket, then another. Before long, the entire household was awake, calm, alert, yet unhurried. This was the watch, the hour between sleeps. In this quiet period, the world seemed to hold its breath. The fire was stirred to life. Someone might add a log or two. The faint glow danced across the walls, painting soft shadows over rough wooden beams. There was no sense of anxiety about being awake. On the contrary, it was expected, a normal part of the night's rhythm. During these gentle hours, people did many things. Some prayed, whispering old words into the darkness. Midnight was believed to be sacred, a time when prayers traveled most easily to heaven. Others used the time to reflect, to speak quietly with loved ones, or to step outside for a moment beneath the stars. The air outside was cold and clear. In the countryside, you could see every constellation burning bright, undimmed by artificial light. Some people even visited neighbors, the faint glow of a candle moving down a narrow dirt path through the snow. A few farmers might check on animals or draw water before the chill of morning, and when they grew drowsy again, they returned to bed. They drifted easily into what they called their second sleep, lighter and calmer, carrying them gently to dawn. For us, this might sound strange, even inconvenient. But for our ancestors, this was balance. This was nature's rhythm. The historian Roger Ekirch, who spent years studying this phenomenon, uncovered hundreds of references to first and second sleep in letters, diaries and literature from centuries past. He found the pattern across continents and cultures, from medieval Europe to pre-industrial Africa and Asia. It wasn't unique to one people. It was human. In 17th century England, the phrase first sleep appeared in household journals as casually as we might mention going to bed. French physicians wrote of the two sleeps as common knowledge. In Italy, early medical texts advised patients to eat lightly after their first sleep if they woke hungry in the night. In every record, it was treated as natural, something everyone simply understood. Even great writers hinted at it. In the Canterbury Tales, Chaucer describes characters waking in the middle of the night for prayer. In Cervantes' Don Quixote, servants rise after their first sleep to tend to small tasks before resting again. For centuries the pattern was so ordinary, it barely needed explaining. The first sleep came early, as the darkness settled in, around 8 or 9 at night. After 4 hours, people naturally stirred. This middle interval, the watch, could last 1 or 2 hours. The second sleep began sometime after midnight and carried them to sunrise. It's easy to forget how long nights were before electricity. In the depths of winter, the sun might set before 5 in the evening and not rise until 8 in the morning, 15 hours of night. That's too long to sleep straight through. So like the tide, sleep divided itself in two. This pattern wasn't just practical, it was spiritual, emotional, even poetic. People used their waking time in ways that modern life rarely allows. Monks and priests recited midnight prayers, known as the Vigils. Farmers repaired tools by candlelight. Mothers nursed children. Couples shared quiet moments of affection. And many simply sat in silence, listening to the faint crackle of their fires and the occasional howl of wind beyond the door. Dreams, too, were shaped by this rhythm. The first sleep brought deep, vivid dreams, often symbolic, filled with strange images and feelings. When people awoke in the watch, they could recall these dreams in detail, talk about them, even write them down. The second sleep that followed was softer, calmer, and filled with gentler, more realistic dreams. The mind had time to bridge the world of imagination and waking thought. This period between sleeps may have been humanity's earliest form of meditation, a state of calm awareness, a meeting place between night and day, between body and spirit. Everything changed with light. When artificial illumination spread through the 19th century, first gas lamps, then electricity, the night itself began to shrink. People stayed up later. Cities glowed with flickering yellow light. The boundary between day and night blurred. Sleep, once guided by darkness, was forced into a new shape. Industrial life demanded long work days and early mornings. Sleep had to fit into one uninterrupted block, convenient and efficient. Doctors of the time began calling this consolidated sleep, and the old two-part rhythm quietly disappeared. By the early 1900s, the phrases first sleep and second sleep had vanished from our language. Entire generations grew up never knowing that human beings had ever slept any other way. And yet, deep within us, the memory remains. Many people still wake naturally in the middle of the night, not startled but quietly alert, their minds calm but wakeful. Often they feel anxious about it, believing something is wrong. But perhaps nothing is wrong at all. Perhaps for a moment they've returned to the old rhythm, to that lost world of the midnight watch. If you've ever found yourself awake at 2 or 3 in the morning, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of the dark, know that this is something ancient. For thousands of years, people woke just as you do now. They tended fires, whispered prayers, or simply sat in thought. They were not broken. They were in sync with the world. Imagine yourself there centuries ago. The room is dim and warm, lit only by a small fire. The floor creaks softly. You open your eyes, not frightened, but peaceful. You rise, perhaps pour a little water, add a log to the flame. The orange light swells and fades. Outside, the wind moves through bare branches. The stars seem endless. You sit for a while, letting your thoughts wander. There is no noise, no glow of screens, no ticking clock. Only the sound of your breath and the heartbeat of the fire. Time drifts, slow and weightless. When your eyes begin to grow heavy again, you lie back down, pulling the blanket close. The world outside remained still, wrapped in its own endless sleep. This was how people lived, balanced between waking and dreaming, darkness and dawn. A natural rhythm lost to the modern world, but perhaps it isn't lost entirely. Each time we wake in the small hours and listen to the silence, we touch that ancient memory. The memory of a world without light, without noise, when the night belonged to the soul. Maybe there is something we can learn from them, that wakefulness in the dark is not something to fight, but something to feel. A reminder that we are creatures of the night as much as the day. That rest is not a straight line but a tide. That the old rhythm still whispers within us, quiet but alive. So tonight, if you wake in the middle of your own sleep, don't worry. Don't force yourself back into the race of time. Let the silence fill you. Listen to the faint rhythm of your breath, the distant hum of the world. In that stillness you might feel it, the ancient pulse of the two-part sleep. The night was never meant to be one single darkness. It was two dreams separated by calm, a space for thought, for prayer, for love, for stillness. And when the second sleep came, it came easily, soft, steady, and whole. Chapter 2. Sleeping with the Gods. Dreams and divine messages in the ancient world, before science claimed the night, before dreams were studied and measured, human beings believed that sleep was sacred. When the eyes closed, the soul did not rest and it traveled. It wandered through hidden realms, speaking with gods, spirits, and the dead. To the people of the ancient world, the act of sleeping was never just biological. It was mystical, a bridge between heaven and earth. Dreams were not private illusions. They were messages, signs, prophecies. Imagine the flicker of oil lamps inside an Egyptian temple, the scent of incense rising in slow spirals toward the high, painted ceilings. A priest lies upon a woven mat beside a statue of the god Imhotep, the healer. His body is still, his mind quiet, waiting for the divine to speak through his dreams. This was known as incubation sleep, a sacred ritual practiced for thousands of years. The dream temples of Egypt were among the earliest sanctuaries devoted entirely to the art of sleeping with intention. People came from far and wide, the sick, the troubled, the desperate, hoping for a message or a cure. They would purify themselves in water, offer food or coins to the gods, and lie down within the temple walls to sleep. In the stillness of the night, they believed the gods would visit them in dreams. Imhotep, the physician god, or Thoth, the god of wisdom, might whisper a remedy or reveal the cause of an illness. Sometimes the dream itself was the cure, a moment of peace granted by divine presence. These rituals were not limited to Egypt. Across the sea, the Greeks adopted and expanded them. They called it enkoimesis, sleeping in the temple of Asclepius, the god of healing. The sick would travel to sacred sites like Epidaurus or Pergamon, bathe in holy water, and lie upon sheepskins in the dim halls. They believed that Asclepius or his sacred serpents would appear to them in dreams, prescribing treatments or blessings. Some dreams were direct, a clear vision of a god speaking. Others were symbolic, filled with strange imagery, rivers, animals, stars, or fires. Priests trained in the art of interpretation would listen to each dream the next morning and translate its meaning. Inscriptions carved into marble still survive, telling stories of miraculous healings. One reads, Hermon of Thasos, blind in one eye, came to the temple seeking sight. In his dream the god touched his face. When he awoke, he saw the dawn. It is hard to know what truly happened. But for those who believed, these were not myths. They were proof that sleep was holy ground. Even outside temples, dreams carried enormous weight in daily life. Greek philosophers studied them. Aristotle wrote that dreams could reveal subtle truths of the body and mind, that illness could sometimes be foretold in sleep. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, advised his students to listen carefully to a patient's dreams. They might reveal what the waking body could not. The Romans, too, were fascinated by the language of dreams. The writer Cicero said, "The soul is most free when the body sleeps." Emperors sought guidance from dreams before wars, and ordinary citizens turned to professional interpreters, dream readers, who could decode the hidden signs of the night. In the great libraries of Alexandria and Nineveh, scholars collected thousands of dream interpretations from Babylon and Sumeria, long before the Greeks ever built their temples. One Babylonian tablet, over 3,000 years old, begins with the words, "If a man dreams of water rising over his house, the gods warn of change." To them, dreams were a kind of cosmic language, one to be studied, feared, and respected. In ancient Mesopotamia, dream interpretation was an official science, part of royal power. Kings kept entire teams of baru, diviners, whose task was to record and analyze dreams as messages from the gods. Before major battles or decisions, rulers would sleep in sacred spaces, hoping for a sign. A favorable dream could inspire confidence. A dark one might delay an entire campaign. One of the oldest dream records comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh. When Gilgamesh dreams of a falling mountain and a fierce storm, his companion Enkidu interprets it as a warning from the gods. It's a moment of prophecy, one that foreshadows his destiny. Across the ancient world, dreams were treated not as fleeting thoughts, but as windows to truth. Even in faraway cultures in China, India, and among the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, similar beliefs flourished. In early Chinese philosophy, dreams were seen as journeys of the Han, the soul that roamed freely while the body rested. Taoist monks practiced techniques to control their dreams, to travel to celestial realms and speak with immortal beings. In India, the Upanishads describe dreaming as one of the four states of the self, a level of consciousness between waking life and pure spirit. The Sanskrit word svapna means both dream and vision. In every corner of the world, people believed that the night spoke, and that sleep was the ear that could hear it. When we look at these beliefs now, through modern eyes, it's easy to dismiss them as superstition. But consider this. For most of human history, the night was not just empty time. It was alive. The darkness itself felt inhabited by gods, ancestors, forces beyond the visible. Without artificial light, dreams were not brief flickers between long workdays. They were entire landscapes, vast, mysterious, and profoundly meaningful. Perhaps that's what modern life has lost. Not just the time to dream, but the reverence for what dreams mean. When Freud and Jung studied dreams in the modern era, they tried to bring this ancient reverence into science. Freud saw dreams as a mirror of the unconscious mind, a way for hidden desires to speak. Jung went further, calling dreams the voice of the collective, the ancient memory of humanity itself. In a way, both men were rediscovering what ancient civilizations already knew, that the night is not silent, and sleep is not empty. Imagine lying in one of those temples centuries ago. The air smells of herbs and oil. A soft chant drifts through the dark. You lie still on the cool stone floor, eyes closed, heart calm. The flickering of the lamps paints strange shapes across the walls. You feel as though the boundary between your body and the air around you is fading, as though something larger, older, and wiser is near. You do not fight sleep. You welcome it. You invite the gods to speak. Hours later, before dawn, you open your eyes. The world is the same and yet changed. Perhaps nothing happened, no voice, no vision. Or perhaps in your dream a gentle figure whispered your name. Perhaps that was enough. The ancients would say you had slept with the gods. Even today, when we close our eyes, a small part of that old belief remains. When we dream, we still step into the same vast ocean that our ancestors once sailed, seeking answers from the dark. Perhaps when we listen closely enough, we can still hear them. The quiet voices of temples long vanished, the footsteps of priests walking by torchlight, the sound of someone whispering softly to a god in the night. This was Chapter 2, Sleeping with the Gods, Dreams and Divine Messages in the Ancient World. A journey through the sacred sleep of our ancestors, when every dream was a conversation with the divine, and the night itself was a temple. Chapter 3, Sleep and Shadows, Night Fears of the Dark Ages. There was a time when night was not gentle, when the setting sun brought not peace but fear. When to sleep was to invite things unseen, spirits, demons, and shadows that crept between dreams. This was the world of the Middle Ages, a world lit by fire and faith, where darkness itself was a living thing. By sunset, villages closed their doors. Windows were shuttered, candles snuffed out, and prayers whispered softly into the thick black air. The night belonged to God, and to everything that opposed him. In the Middle Ages, sleep was not simply rest. It was a vulnerable state, a surrender of body and soul to powers beyond human control. People believed that while they slept, their souls could wander, or worse, be visited. Many feared the hour after midnight, when the church bells marked the passing of time. This was the witching hour, a time when spirits and demons were thought to move freely, and among these night terrors was one that haunted countless souls, the night hag. Imagine a peasant in a small wooden hut, the air heavy and still. He lies down on a straw mattress wrapped in rough linen. The only sound is the crackle of the dying fire. Then he wakes, or thinks he does. His eyes open, but he cannot move. His chest feels heavy, as though something sits upon it. He tries to cry out, but no sound escapes. In the dim light, a shadow looms above him. A woman's figure, pale and thin, pressing the air from his lungs. He cannot breathe. He cannot scream. And then, just as suddenly, it is gone. He gasps awake, drenched in sweat, heart pounding. He believes, as everyone around him believes, that a demon has visited him in the night. We know this experience today as sleep paralysis. But to the people of the Middle Ages, it was proof of the supernatural. They called it by many names. In England, the old hag. In Germany, der Nachtmar, the nightmare, a spirit that rode its victims as they slept. In France, la cauchemar, which gave us our modern word nightmare. These were not bad dreams. They were real encounters, proof that the darkness was alive. In old manuscripts and woodcuts, artists tried to capture what people described. A dark creature crouched on a sleeper's chest, a pale demon sitting in candlelight. In one famous painting from the 1700s, centuries later, the artist Henry Fuseli painted the nightmare, a woman draped over her bed, her body limp, while a small goblin sits on her ribs and a shadowed horse peers through the curtain. It is both terrifying and strangely familiar, a vision of what countless souls once feared. But long before Fuseli's art, the stories already lived. In monasteries, monks spoke of nocturnal visitations, temptations from devils who came at night to whisper sins into their dreams. Priests warned their congregations to pray before sleep. to guard their souls from the shadows. And in rural villages, people hung iron charms by their beds, or carved protective symbols into wood. Some placed a small piece of bread or salt on the chest to keep evil spirits away. The night was not to be trusted. Even animals were believed to sense the unseen. A dog barking at midnight, a cat staring into an empty corner. These were signs that something was near. The church offered one kind of comfort, the promise that faith could shield you. Each evening the compline or night prayer echoed through monasteries. Protect us, O Lord, as we stay awake. Watch over us as we sleep. That awake we may keep watch with Christ, and asleep rest in his peace. But for those outside monastery walls, fear remained. The night was vast, the forests dark, the wind alive with whispers. Sleep itself became a kind of spiritual battlefield, a place where good and evil wrestled for the soul. And yet, not all of the night was terror. There was wonder, too, the sense that dreams carried messages, that visions could reveal truths unseen by daylight. Medieval people believed that some dreams came from God, others from the devil, and some from the state of the body itself. A heavy meal might summon troubling dreams. Fasting, on the other hand, could open the mind to divine visions. In monastic records there are tales of saints who received holy messages in their sleep, warnings of danger or glimpses of paradise. One monk wrote that in the quiet hours before dawn, he saw the Virgin Mary standing by his bed, surrounded by light. For every nightmare there was a miracle dream. Still, the fear of sleep never fully left. To fall asleep was to surrender, to give the darkness its chance. So people created rituals of safety. Before bed they crossed themselves 3 times. They recited a prayer, or placed a sprig of rosemary beneath the pillow, a charm against evil spirits. Children were taught to say, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, bless the bed that I lie on, simple words, but they carried centuries of fear and faith. The Middle Ages were a world where the unknown pressed close, where science had not yet chased away the shadows. But perhaps in their fear, they also felt something we have lost, a deep respect for the mystery of night. Today, when we wake from a nightmare, we reach for our phones, our lamps, our logic. We tell ourselves it was nothing. But for our ancestors, every dream, every breath in the dark, meant something. They lived in a world where darkness had power, and where sleep, that fragile bridge between life and death, was sacred and dangerous all at once. If you could stand in that time, Anbu, in a small candle-lit room, the cold stone beneath your feet, the howl of wind outside, you might feel it too. The thinness of the air, the closeness of something unseen. The way your breath fogs in the dark, as though the night itself is watching. And when you finally lie down to rest, you might whisper the same words that countless souls whispered before you. Keep me safe through this dark night, and let me wake in light. This was Chapter 3, Sleep and Shadows, Night Fears of the Dark Ages, a journey through a time when the night was full of eyes, and every dream was a doorway, to heaven or to something far more ancient. Chapter 4, Royal Rest, How Kings and Queens Slept Through History, across the long corridors of history. Sleep has always revealed something about who we are, our fears, our hopes, and the worlds we build around us. But for kings and queens, sleep was never a simple act. It was a reflection of power, of divine right, and sometimes of deep and private sorrow. In the candle-lit chambers of palaces and fortresses, rest became ceremony. The royal bed was not merely a place to dream. It was a throne draped in velvet. From the earliest monarchies, the act of lying down to sleep was a performance, watched, respected, and often filled with meaning far beyond comfort. In the grand courts of medieval France, the king's bedchamber was no private retreat. It was a stage for royal ritual. Every morning the king would awaken before a gathered audience in a ceremony known as the lever du roi, the rising of the king. Courtiers, ministers, and nobles would attend to watch him wake, dress, and prepare for the day. Even the act of opening his eyes became a symbol of the kingdom's rebirth. Louis XIV, the Sun King, took this tradition to dazzling heights. His bed at Versailles was the center of an entire universe of gold, mirrors, and painted ceilings. He was the living sun, and his sleep, like the setting and rising of the day, marked the rhythm of his realm. But this magnificence came with weight. Each gesture was observed, each breath recorded. Even in his sleep, Louis carried France upon his chest. His bed was a monument, but perhaps not a sanctuary. Many rulers, though surrounded by luxury, struggled with rest. Power and peace rarely shared the same pillow. Queen Elizabeth Fwine of England was known for her strength, her fiery intelligence, and her solitude. Yet her servants often found her pacing the palace halls long after midnight, whispering to herself. The burden of rule, the memory of betrayal, and the shadow of death followed her into the night. Sleep for her was not gentle. It was haunted. Napoleon Bonaparte, centuries later, famously claimed he needed only 4 hours of sleep. He was a man of constant motion, waking in darkness to write orders, study maps, or prepare for battle. He said that too much sleep made a man soft. But his letters reveal exhaustion. His mind was restless, his nights fractured. Even emperors, it seems, cannot command their dreams. Others turn their beds into places of devotion rather than rest. King Philip II of Spain, a ruler both powerful and deeply religious, had his bed built beside the chapel altar in his palace. He wanted to hear Mass even from his mattress. He feared dying in sleep without confession, and so even slumber became a prayer, a negotiation with eternity. And then there were those whose royal beds were filled not with reverence, but with loneliness. Marriage for kings and queens was rarely about love. In the Tudor courts of England, King Henry VIII slept in magnificent carved oak beds, surrounded by gold-threaded tapestries and perfumed linens. But his 6 wives each lived apart, separated by walls, politics, and suspicion. The royal bed was where heirs were conceived, but it was rarely a place of comfort. In contrast, Queen Victoria's story offers a rare glimpse of love within royal walls. After marrying Prince Albert, she wrote in her diaries of quiet nights, of shared laughter and warmth. She described him as her peace in a storm. When he died, she could not bear to sleep in another man's bed. For 40 years she kept his side of the bed prepared, his clothes laid out every morning, his shaving water warmed, as if love itself might return one day. For her, sleep became a kind of waiting. Dreams, too, held special meaning for royalty. For thousands of years, rulers believed their dreams were messages from gods or omens of fate. Pharaohs recorded them on temple walls. One ancient Egyptian king dreamt of 7 fat cows devoured by 7 thin ones, and the priests interpreted it as a prophecy of famine. That vision was later retold in the story of Joseph and the Pharaoh's dream, a warning that shaped an empire's survival. Centuries later, Queen Catherine de' Medici spoke of a dream filled with broken glass and blood. Weeks later, her husband, King Henry II, died in a jousting tournament when a splintered lance pierced his eye. The dream, she said, had foretold it. Even in modern times, the belief persisted. Russia's last Tsar, Nicholas II, once dreamt of a sea of blood before the Great War began. He dismissed it as superstition until years later, in exile, he wrote in his diary that the dream had been truth disguised. If we could walk through these ancient bedrooms, we would see that architecture itself mirrored the meaning of rest. Royal chambers were designed like temples, canopies embroidered with gold thread, curtains scented with rose oil, steps leading up to high mattresses stuffed with swan's down. The height of the bed, the number of pillows, even the color of the sheets. Everything was a language of power. Louis XIV's bed at Versailles was said to be the most splendid ever made. It stood at the center of his room, beneath a painted ceiling of gods and light. The bed was 10 feet wide, framed by gold leaf and draped with crimson silk. To touch it, to even approach it, was a privilege reserved for the highest of nobles. To be present when the king went to sleep or woke was a moment of honor greater than a medal. In England, royal beds became witnesses to history itself. Monarchs died in them, heirs were proclaimed beside them, and treaties were signed upon their silken covers. The bed was both cradle and tomb, a place where history began and ended, again and again. Yet no matter the grandeur, no matter the faith or the fear, every king and queen faced the same truth. When the candles burned low and the curtains were drawn, power slipped away. Crowns, jewels, and titles meant nothing in the silence between dreams. In that stillness, they became what all humans are, fragile, dreaming beings. Adrift in the night, Queen Elizabeth II, in modern times, was said to sleep exactly 8 hours, preferring quiet country rooms at Balmoral Castle over Buckingham Palace. She once remarked that the sound of Scottish rain makes one's dreams last longer. It seems that even after centuries of empire, royalty still sought the same peace their ancestors longed for, a moment of stillness untouched by duty. Perhaps that is the truest lesson of royal rest. Sleep is the great equalizer. The pharaoh beneath golden carvings, the monk on a straw mat, the empress surrounded by silk, all close their eyes to the same mystery. Each drifts into a place where crowns fade and thrones crumble. In those hours of darkness, the mighty and the humble are the same. The ruler of nations and the poorest peasant both surrender to something greater, a force older than kingdoms, older than memory itself. And maybe in that surrender lies the most human truth of all, that even kings and queens, with all their glory and fear, must give themselves to the quiet mercy of sleep. Chapter 5. Dream temples of ancient Greece. Long before the first doctors, before science tried to explain the mind, people believed that healing came from dreams. To sleep was not only to rest, it was to open a door between the human and the divine. And nowhere was that door more sacred than in the dream temples of ancient Greece. They were called Asclepiae, sanctuaries dedicated to the god Asclepius, son of Apollo, god of medicine and light. Across Greece and its islands, from Epidaurus to Kos, people made pilgrimages to these places of holy sleep. They came with fevers, blindness, sorrow, and pain. They came seeking something the waking world could not give, the voice of the gods speaking through dreams. The journey to the temple was not a simple visit. It was a transformation. Travelers often walked for days, fasting, bathing in sacred springs, and praying for purification. By the time they reached the marble gates, their minds were quiet, their bodies tired, ready to surrender. At the temple's heart lay the Abaton, the hall of sacred sleep. No light touched its walls. The air was cool, filled with the scent of burning herbs, laurel, myrrh, and olive oil. Pilgrims would lie upon woven mats or soft animal skins, sometimes beneath the open sky, sometimes in shadowed stone chambers. Priests whispered invocations, calling Asclepius to descend in dreams. Then silence. Dozens of people sleeping together, breathing softly in the dark, waiting for the gods to appear. They believed that Asclepius came in many forms. Sometimes as a man holding a serpent staff, sometimes as light, sometimes as the serpent itself, a sacred creature that glided silently across the floors of the temple. If it touched a sleeper, it was a sign that healing had begun. When morning came, the pilgrims awoke slowly, recalling their dreams. Some saw visions, the god placing hands upon their wounds. Some heard words, a command to change their habits, to forgive, to walk, to bathe, to live differently. Others dreamt of water or snakes or light, symbols that the temple priests would interpret. Then the healers would prescribe cures, herbs, exercises, sacrifices, or prayers, all based on what the dream revealed. It was medicine, faith, and psychology intertwined, a practice that lasted for over 1,000 years. At Epidaurus, the largest and most famous of these temples, the walls were covered with inscriptions, testimonies from those who had been healed. One stone tells the story of a blind man who dreamt that Asclepius touched his eyes, and when he awoke he could see. Another describes a woman who dreamt of swallowing a serpent, and her illness vanished. For the Greeks, these were not miracles, but proof that the gods walked among them in sleep. Even Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, trained near such temples. Though he would later seek natural explanations for disease, he never denied the power of rest and dreams. He wrote that sleep and watchfulness rightly timed are the pillars of health. Perhaps he learned that lesson beneath the whispering columns of an Asclepieion. Imagine the night in one of these temples. The moonlight spills over marble courtyards. Oil lamps flicker in the corridors. The sound of distant chanting drifts through the air. You lie upon a cool stone floor, the scent of olive oil and incense surrounding you. Your mind slows, the weight of your body fades, and somewhere between waking and dream, you feel something ancient, a presence older than language, watching, listening, healing. In the Greek imagination, sleep itself was divine. They believed two spirits ruled it, Hypnos, god of sleep, and Morpheus, god of dreams. They were gentle sons of the night, carrying the gift of oblivion and the visions of meaning. In art, Hypnos is shown as a winged youth, touching the eyelids of mortals with his wand. His twin brother Thanatos represented death, the eternal sleep, reminding the Greeks how thin the veil was between both states. To sleep was to visit the underworld briefly and return with knowledge. That belief shaped not only healing, but philosophy, poetry, and faith. Even Socrates spoke of dreams that guided his decisions. Aristotle wrote that dreams could reveal the inner motions of the soul. For the Greeks, the dream was not chaos, it was communication. At night, when the torches dimmed and the last prayers echoed through the temple halls, the faithful drifted into what they called enkoimesis, the sacred sleep. It was not ordinary rest, but a ritualized descent into the mind's underworld, guided by divine presence. Some heard voices, some saw visions of serpents shedding their skin, symbols of rebirth. Others dreamed of flight, of stars, of oceans, images of freedom and transformation. In the morning, the priests would move quietly among the sleepers, listening to their stories, writing them down on tablets of wax or stone. Each dream became part of the temple's living memory, a record of human healing and divine mercy. Centuries later, when Rome conquered Greece, the dream temples continued to flourish. Even emperors came seeking cures. The Roman general Marcus Aurelius wrote of visiting an Asclepieion and dreaming of peace during a time of war. In those chambers, the restless minds of rulers, soldiers, and poets all found the same stillness. And though the world has changed, the echo of those temples remains. Today we speak of meditation, therapy, and the science of sleep, but perhaps deep within. The old Greek idea survives, that when we close our eyes we enter a sacred space, where the body can mend and the mind can listen to something greater. When you lie down tonight, think of those ancient marble halls open to the sky. Think of the pilgrims breathing softly in the dark, waiting for a God's whisper. And imagine that the same power, whatever name we give it now, still moves quietly through our dreams. For sleep, as the Greeks once said, is not the absence of life, but its renewal. It is the place where the mortal meets the divine. Chapter 6. The Sleep of Warriors. Rest before battle night falls upon the battlefield. The air is heavy with tension, the scent of sweat, smoke, and iron drifting through the camp. Somewhere in the distance an owl calls, and for a moment everything is still. Tomorrow men will fight. They will raise their swords and shields, and many will not see another dawn. Yet tonight, before the blood and chaos, they must do something almost impossible. They must sleep. It seems strange, even unthinkable, to rest while standing on the edge of death. And yet, throughout history, the greatest warriors, from the disciplined legions of Rome to the silent samurai of Japan, all knew that the calm before battle was sacred. Courage, they believed, was not born in the roar of combat, but in the silence that came before it. In the shadowed tents of feudal Japan, samurai sat by the dim light of candles. Their armor gleamed softly, freshly polished, each piece arranged with ritual precision. Before the battle, they prepared not just their weapons but their minds. Many practiced meditation, emptying their thoughts until the noise of fear dissolved. Some composed short poems, reflections on impermanence and the beauty of a fleeting life. If I die in battle, one might write, let my soul become the wind. When their prayers and preparations were done, the samurai would lie upon woven mats, the sound of rain tapping gently against paper walls. In that stillness they sought peace, not to escape the coming violence, but to face it with clarity. They believed that death was not to be feared, but met with dignity. Their final act before battle was sleep, calm, deliberate, and sacred. Far away, centuries earlier, the disciplined soldiers of Rome followed a different rhythm. The Roman camp was a symbol of order, every tent aligned, every fire positioned by rule. Even the night before war was bound by structure. Soldiers rubbed oil into their muscles, ate small portions of bread and wine, and prayed quietly to Mars, the god of war. Then, wrapped in woolen cloaks, they lay in pairs beneath the stars, sharing warmth in the cold. Around them sentries stood guard, their footsteps steady in the dark. The generals understood what modern science now proves, that sleep before battle could decide the outcome. A soldier deprived of rest would falter, lose precision, and panic. So they enforced rest as law. To sleep was an act of duty. The hum of low conversation faded. The crackling of fires softened, and soon the Roman legions slept, thousands of men breathing in unison, poised between dreams and destiny. In the far north, where the sea meets the storm, Viking warriors gathered in long halls of timber and flame. The night before battle was a sacred feast, filled with songs, laughter, and the heavy scent of mead. But when the fire burned low and the shadows grew long, silence crept in. The warriors lay upon animal furs, axes resting beside them, and closed their eyes. For them, sleep was a bridge to the divine. The Norse believed dreams could reveal fate. If a warrior dreamt of victory, it meant Odin's blessing. If he dreamt of drowning or falling, it meant his time had come. They sought visions of Valhalla, golden halls beyond the clouds where the brave feasted forever. To dream was to see the path ahead, and so they slept not in fear, but with reverence, listening for the voice of destiny carried by the gods. In the medieval age, knights faced their own sleepless nights before war. By candlelight, they prayed beside their swords, confessing sins and asking for forgiveness. Many kept vigil through the night, kneeling before makeshift altars, the flicker of light reflecting on their armor. But when exhaustion came, they would finally rest, trusting their fate to God's will. Chroniclers tell of knights sleeping in full armor, their shields beside them, the murmurs of prayer echoing through the dark. When dawn broke, the camp stirred. Horses snorted, bells rang, and out of that fragile sleep, men rose to meet their destiny, tired perhaps, but at peace with whatever the day might bring. Even in the modern age, on battlefields far from home, the pattern endures. In a trench beneath a grey sky, or in a desert tent under foreign stars, soldiers still find moments to close their eyes. The sounds are different now. The hum of engines, the buzz of radios, the soft click of safety catches being checked one last time. Yet the need is the same. Sleep is survival. Psychologists who study warfare have found what ancient generals always knew. Rest calms the mind, strengthens the body, and steadies the spirit. In the hours before battle, a few moments of true sleep can make the difference between chaos and control. It is the body's last defense against the weight of fear. And so, across centuries, across every language and faith, the warrior's night remains the same, a fragile balance between exhaustion and eternity. Whether beneath silk canopies or rough wool blankets, they have always sought the same peace, the stillness before the storm. Imagine that moment. The campfires dim, the voices fade, the wind sighs through the tents. A soldier adjusts his cloak, turns once and lets his eyes close, his thoughts slow. The noise of the world falls away. In his final dream before dawn, perhaps he sees home, a family waiting by a quiet hearth, a child's laughter, the scent of bread. For just a heartbeat, he is not a soldier, but simply a man, and when the first light touches the horizon, the trumpets call. The warriors rise, stepping into destiny with clear eyes and steady hands. Whatever fear they held has been washed away by the night's rest. In that fragile, fleeting sleep, they found the courage to face the day. For sleep, even in war, is not weakness. It is the truest act of strength, to surrender to darkness when the world demands vigilance, to trust in life even when death stands close. Every warrior who ever lived has known that moment. The stillness before the storm, the breath before the battle cry, the dream before the dawn. Chapter 7. Dreams and Divination. Prophetic Sleep in Ancient Cultures. Since the dawn of civilization, humans have looked to their dreams for meaning. Long before psychology or science, before we understood the workings of the mind, people believed that dreams were not random, but messages. Whispers from the divine, shadows of fate, glimpses of what had not yet come to pass. In ancient temples, desert caves, and royal chambers, dreams were studied like sacred texts. For countless generations, sleep was not merely rest, it was revelation. In ancient Mesopotamia, more than 4,000 years ago, kings and priests recorded their dreams on clay tablets. The Babylonians believed that every dream was a prophecy, a message from their gods. They even had manuals, great collections of symbols where every image held a meaning. To dream of a river meant life and renewal. To dream of a collapsing wall meant danger. A lion symbolized victory. A serpent, betrayal. The high priests would interpret these dreams carefully, often deciding the fate of entire kingdoms based on what they saw in sleep. If a ruler dreamt of fire, it might signal war. If he dreamt of water, peace might follow. The line between reality and dream was thin, and the night was as powerful as the day. As time passed, these beliefs spread westward to Egypt. The Egyptians thought dreams were direct communications from the gods, personal letters delivered through sleep. They built dream chambers, small sanctuaries near temples, where people could sleep on holy ground, hoping to receive visions that revealed cures for illness or guidance for the future. The priests of Ra and Thoth, the gods of light and wisdom, acted as interpreters. Dreams, they believed, were the soul's travels while the body rested. During sleep, the Ba, the spiritual self, left the body to wander through the realms of gods and ancestors, returning at dawn with messages from beyond. That's why Egyptians placed special amulets beneath their pillows to protect the spirit during its journey and ensure its safe return. In Greece, this tradition became an art. The people of the classical world were fascinated by the language of dreams. Philosophers, poets, and priests all sought to understand them. Aristotle wrote that dreams could reveal the secret movements of the soul. Plato believed they reflected divine truth. And in the healing temples of Asclepius, people slept in hope of a dream that would cure them, a sacred vision of health sent by the gods. But there were other, darker traditions too, times when dreams were seen not as gifts, but as warnings. In ancient Israel, dreams carried enormous spiritual weight. The Bible tells of Joseph, the dream interpreter, who foresaw famine and abundance in the dreams of Pharaoh. To the Hebrew prophets, the dream was a holy message, a voice from heaven breaking into mortal silence. But they also warned that not all dreams were pure. Some, they said, came from deceitful spirits or restless minds. To tell the difference required wisdom, a divine gift in itself. Farther east in India and China, dreams took on even deeper philosophical meaning. In the Hindu epics, dreams often guided heroes through spiritual transformation. To dream of a god meant divine favor. To dream of death often symbolized rebirth or change. In the Upanishads, the dream state was seen as a bridge between waking and enlightenment, a middle world where truth could be glimpsed through illusion. In China, ancient texts like the Zhougong's Book of Auspicious and Inauspicious Dreams catalogued thousands of dream signs. The Chinese believed that the spirit, or hun, could travel beyond the body during sleep. Dreams could carry one across distances, through heavens and underworlds, revealing events before they happened. Emperors often kept dream interpreters in their courts, consulting them before great decisions. To ignore a dream was to ignore fate. Across the Americas, among the native peoples, dreams held equal power, but with gentler meaning. For many tribes, dreams were sacred teachers. They were not commands from gods, but lessons from nature and spirit animals. The Lakota, for instance, believed that dreams revealed one's true path, a vision quest granted by the Great Spirit. The Iroquois treated dreams as living messages that must be honored. To ignore them was to upset the balance of one's soul. Even in the far north, among the Arctic shamans, Dreams served as maps to unseen realms. The shaman's power came from traveling in dreams, entering the spirit world to find lost souls or heal the sick. Through rhythmic drumming and deep trance, they would step between waking and sleeping, the border where dreams take shape. Everywhere, across all lands and ages, humanity has sought meaning in sleep. To dream was to receive a message, to touch the unknown, to step briefly beyond the limits of flesh and time. And though our understanding has changed, the wonder remains. Today, scientists study dreams as the brain's reflection of thought and memory. Psychologists see them as mirrors of emotion. But even now, in the quiet hours of the night, when you wake from a dream that feels more real than waking life, you feel something ancient stir within you, that same question our ancestors once whispered, "What was that trying to tell me?" Dreams may no longer decide wars or shape empires, but they still shape us. They remind us that there are parts of the mind we do not control, voices within that still speak in the language of myth and symbol, and perhaps that is their truest divination, not to show the future, but to reveal the hidden landscapes of the soul. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, remember those who came before, the kings who dreamed of gods, the prophets who saw visions of the future, the healers who listened to the voice of dreams. You share with them the same ancient gift, the mystery of the night. When your eyes close and the waking world fades, you too enter the timeless place where dreams are born. And in that soft, sacred silence, the universe still speaks, just as it always has. Chapter 8. The Art of Napping, Ancient Secrets of Midday. Rest when the sun stands at its highest and the world grows quiet. A strange stillness spreads across the earth. The air becomes heavy, time seems to slow, and even the busiest hearts begin to fade into calm. In that golden pause between morning and afternoon lies one of humanity's oldest rituals, the nap. For as long as people have worked, dreamed and lived under the sun, they have known that the body has its own rhythm, a natural longing for rest in the middle of the day. Long before clocks and schedules divided time into strict hours, our ancestors listened to their bodies. They rose with the dawn, labored through the cool morning, and when the sun burned bright at noon, they stopped. They lay down in the shade of trees under temple columns or in the cool corners of their homes. And they slept. Today we call it a nap. But in the ancient world it was far more, a sacred act of renewal, a pause that linked the human body to the rhythm of the earth itself. In the villages of ancient Egypt, life followed the pulse of the Nile. Farmers worked at sunrise, tending to their crops in the soft light of morning. But by midday the desert heat turned unbearable. The tools were set aside, the fields left silent. Workers returned to their mud-brick homes, shaded by palm leaves, and slept. These short rests, known in ancient texts as siesta of the soul, were not laziness. They were survival. Egyptian physicians even prescribed short midday sleep to preserve strength and clarity. Even the mighty pharaohs were said to nap after their morning councils. In the cool sanctuaries of their palaces, they reclined on woven couches, servants fanning the air with palm leaves. There, behind walls painted with stars and gold, they allowed their minds to drift. In those quiet hours, it was believed, the gods of rest, Bes and Hathor, walked through dreams, offering peace to both rulers and peasants alike. Centuries later, the Romans perfected this art of midday rest. They called it meridiatio, from the word merides, meaning midday. To them, the hours after lunch were sacred, not for worship, but for repose. The entire city of Rome would hush, Shops closed, baths emptied, streets fell silent. Even soldiers, when not at war, were encouraged to lie down in their quarters after the midday meal. For Romans, this daily nap was part of disciplina, balance in all things. Philosophers wrote that the mind, like the body, required intervals of rest to remain sharp. The poet Horace praised the peace of afternoon sleep, saying it restored the clarity of thought and softened the edge of ambition. Wealthy citizens reclined on couches in their atria, shaded by fabric canopies, letting the warm air drift across their faces. Common laborers lay down under trees or porticos, their sandals resting beside them. From the grand villas of senators to the dusty fields of farmers, the rhythm of Rome slowed each afternoon. It was a civilization that understood that power could rest and still remain strong. The tradition lived on through time. As the empire faded and Europe entered the medieval age, the midday nap continued, though it took new forms. In monasteries, monks divided the day into sacred hours, and one of them, after the midday prayer, was dedicated to rest. After their simple meal of bread and broth, the monastery would fall silent. The monks would retire to their cots, or even to the chapel floor, closing their eyes for a brief, holy sleep known as repose of humility. It was not indulgence but discipline, a way to renew the spirit and body for evening prayer. Even great theologians wrote of this habit. Thomas Aquinas noted that rest was necessary for contemplation, for the body must cease its motion that the soul may rise to thought. Outside the monasteries, peasants in the fields followed the same rhythm. In summer, when work began at dawn, they would pause by noon, spreading cloaks over the grass and sleeping beneath the shade of trees. The hum of bees, the rustle of wind, the warmth of the sun, all formed a natural lullaby. For them, this pause between morning toil and evening labor was the only moment of freedom the day allowed. In southern Europe, especially in Spain and Italy, the tradition became a way of life, the siesta. The very word comes from the Latin sexta hora, the 6th hour of the day counting from dawn. Around this hour everything stopped. The marketplace quieted. The bells of the church tolled softly and doors closed. People ate, rested, and let the heat of the sun pass before returning to work. Travelers to Spain during the Renaissance were astonished by this ritual. They wrote that in Madrid or Seville, the city itself seemed to fall asleep. Even the animals, it seemed, rested. The siesta was both practical and poetic, a recognition that life should bend to nature, not the other way around. But beyond comfort, the nap had deeper meanings in different parts of the world. In China, during the Tang and Song dynasties, afternoon rest was encouraged by scholars and poets. It was known as wujiao, the noon sleep. In imperial courts and humble villages alike, it was considered essential for health and wisdom. Philosophers of the time believed that the human spirit, the qi, flowed in harmony with the sun. When the sun reached its peak, the body's energy shifted inward. To rest at that hour was to preserve balance between heaven and earth. Officials in the royal court were even permitted to sleep at their desks after lunch. Artists, monks, and writers followed this practice too. The poet Su Shi wrote, "A nap at noon clears the heart and opens the mind. Even the immortals must rest beneath the sun." In India, ancient Ayurvedic teachings also spoke of the right way to rest. They warned that sleeping too long in the day could lead to imbalance, but a short nap, taken at the proper time, was said to renew vitality. Warriors and scholars alike practiced Ardha Nidra, the half-sleep, lying still with eyes closed, hovering between waking and dreaming. It was not deep sleep, but meditation through rest, a way to restore energy without losing awareness. Even the great empires of the Islamic Golden Age celebrated the midday nap. The Prophet Muhammad is said to have encouraged a short rest after the noon prayer, known as Qailula. It was believed to strengthen memory, improve health, and prepare the believer for the long hours of evening worship and work. In the bustling cities of Baghdad, Damascus, and Cordoba, shopkeepers closed their doors at noon, and for a brief time the world grew quiet again. This shared rhythm connected humanity across continents. Whether under the shade of olive trees or behind the cool walls of mosques, the midday rest was a reminder that the human heart beats to the same gentle pace everywhere. But as time marched forward, as cities grew louder, machines replaced sunlight with electric glare, and work stretched endlessly through the day. The art of napping began to fade. The industrial age prized constant motion, endless productivity. Sleep was seen as weakness. The nap, once sacred, became something for children or the idle. Yet even then the human body remembered. In factories and offices, workers still yawned after lunch, their minds growing foggy, their energy dipping. Science would later explain what ancient people already knew, that our biology is designed for 2 peaks of wakefulness and 2 natural valleys of rest, one at night and one gently in the early afternoon. Today, research confirms what the ancients practiced instinctively. A short nap, 20 to 30 minutes, improves memory, creativity, and emotional balance. It restores alertness and lowers stress. It even strengthens the heart. The simple act of closing the eyes for a brief while can transform the day. In Japan, this truth has found new expression. There, the culture of hard work gave birth to a curious phenomenon called inamuri, sleeping while present. In crowded trains, in offices, even during meetings, it is common to see people resting quietly, heads bowed. It is not shameful but honorable, a sign of dedication that one has worked so hard they must rest where they stand. Though modern in form, it echoes the same spirit as the ancient siesta, the body claiming back its moment of peace. Around the world, in cultures old and new, the nap is returning. From busy cities to quiet villages, people are rediscovering what their ancestors always knew, that life is not meant to be constant motion. The mind, like the tide, needs to ebb and flow. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this: the sound of afternoon insects, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the soft rustle of a curtain as a breeze drifts through. Somewhere in a quiet courtyard 2,000 years ago, a Roman philosopher rests in the same golden light. A monk in a cool stone monastery exhales softly after prayer. A farmer in Egypt lies beneath a palm, the hum of the river in his ears. A Chinese poet, quill in hand, drifts between lines of verse and dreams. They are all connected to you through the same rhythm, the same pulse of life that calls for stillness beneath the noon sun. The nap, in truth, is not about sleep alone. It is about surrender, a gentle reminder that rest is not the opposite of work, but its companion. That the world, for all its urgency, moves in cycles of motion and pause day and night. Breath and silence. When you allow yourself to rest in the middle of the day, you join a lineage older than any civilization. You become part of the ancient song that has guided humankind for millennia. A song of balance, of rhythm, of trust in time itself. So when the afternoon grows quiet and your eyelids grow heavy, remember that you are not being lazy. You are being human. You are honoring the wisdom of those who came before, who understood that life's truest strength comes not from how long we stay awake, but from how deeply we allow ourselves to rest. Chapter 9. The Night Watchers, Guardians, Monks and those who never slept. When the world sleeps, there have always been those who remain awake. They move through the silent hours, unseen and often forgotten, keeping their quiet vigil over the resting world. In every civilization, in every age, there were night watchers, soldiers, monks, mystics, and wanderers who traded the warmth of sleep for the chill of the stars. For them, night was not a time of rest, but a sacred realm of duty, devotion, and thought. While others dreamed, these chosen few stood between safety and danger, between the known and the unknown. Their eyes were the first to see dawn, their hearts the last to leave the dark. In ancient cities surrounded by walls and fear, the night watch was a profession both honored and dreaded. In Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, watchmen paced the ramparts of Ur and Babylon, carrying oil lamps that glowed faintly in the desert wind. They listened for footsteps beyond the gate, for the cry of wolves, for the whisper of enemies in the dark. Each hour they would call out to one another across the battlements, a human chain of wakefulness stretching through the night. In Egypt, too, there were guardians of the dark. Along the banks of the Nile, priests of the temples kept vigil before the statues of their gods. As the city slept, they burned incense and recited hymns meant to guide the divine spirits through the underworld journey of Ra, the sun god, who each night descended into the shadows only to rise again at dawn. To fall asleep was to fail in one's sacred duty. Their wakefulness was part of the great cosmic rhythm of night and day, death and rebirth. Far to the west, in Greece and Rome, the night watch became an institution. In the Roman Empire, the Vigils, the city's night guards and firekeepers, patrolled the cobblestone streets after sunset. Cloaked against the chill, carrying small lanterns, they checked every alley, every wooden stall for the threat of fire or unrest. They were the guardians of order when the city fell silent. The poet Juvenal once wrote that, "When Rome sleeps, the Vigils dream with open eyes, but not all who stayed awake were warriors or guards. Some were seekers of the divine." In the monasteries of the early Christian world, night was a time for prayer and communion. Monks rose long before dawn, sometimes after only a few hours of rest, to perform the sacred office of the night, Vigiliae. In cold stone chapels lit by candlelight, they chanted psalms that echoed softly through the dark halls. To them, sleeplessness was not a burden but a gift. The night was holy, a time when the distractions of the world fell away, and the voice of the divine could be heard in the silence. The ancient rule of Saint Benedict described these hours as the soul's true awakening. "Rise," it said, "while the others sleep, and let your heart watch in the stillness of night." For centuries, these night prayers shaped the rhythm of spiritual life. In mountain monasteries from Ireland to the deserts of Egypt, monks and nuns marked time not by sunlight, but by the sound of bells that called them to rise, to chant, to keep watch. Theirs was a different kind of rest, not of the body but of the spirit. Yet not all night watchers were holy men. In medieval towns there were others, the night watchmen hired by city councils to guard against thieves, fires, and the unknown. Wrapped in thick cloaks, carrying staves or halberds, they walked the cobblestone streets, calling out the hours in steady voices. Past midnight, all's well. They would shout into the fog, a reassurance to the sleeping townsfolk that the world still turned safely in the dark. Sometimes, those voices were the only sound that broke the stillness of the night, lonely, echoing between shuttered windows. For the night watchman, fatigue was a constant companion. Many fought to keep their eyes open, leaning on their staffs, staring into the distance where shadow met shadow. They were paid little, forgotten quickly, and yet without them, the sleeping city would have been vulnerable to chaos. Beyond the walls, in the wilderness and the frontiers, there were other watchers, shepherds, travelers and soldiers on night patrol. For them, sleeplessness was not a calling but survival. Imagine the quiet terror of a Roman sentry standing guard on a fog-covered border, or a medieval archer in a wooden tower watching for movement in the dark. The human mind in those hours played strange tricks. Shapes moved where none existed. Whispers turned to words. The night itself seemed alive. To stay awake through such silence was an act of courage. Across the world, the idea of the night watcher took on mystical meaning. In ancient India, yogis and ascetics practiced jagaran, wakefulness, as a form of devotion. They believed that by staying awake through the night, meditating under the stars, they could transcend the illusions of the material world. The body, weary and heavy, became a test. The spirit, awake and alert, moved closer to enlightenment. In Sufi traditions of the Middle East, the night was called Layl, a time of divine intimacy. Mystics gathered to chant and pray until dawn, believing that sleepless nights drew them nearer to God. The poet Rumi wrote, "The night is a candle for lovers. Its silence reveals the heart." These were the watchers of the soul, who found in darkness a mirror for the light within. But not every sleepless night was chosen. In cities and villages alike, there were countless people who stayed awake not from devotion, but from necessity. Mothers nursing their children, sailors guiding their ships, healers tending to the sick and the lonely, all were part of the great brotherhood of night watchers. While others dreamed, they labored quietly, unseen beneath the indifferent stars. As centuries passed, the role of the night watcher evolved but never vanished. During the age of exploration, navigators on tall ships kept vigil over endless waves, their eyes fixed on the horizon for the faintest sign of land or storm. In industrial cities, factory workers tended fires and machines through long nights. Their torches and lamps glowed like constellations in the darkness, small islands of wakefulness in a sea of sleep. The 19th and 20th centuries brought new kinds of watchers: police officers, doctors, nurses, astronomers, and night shift laborers, all keeping the old tradition alive in a world that no longer truly sleeps. Humanity built machines to stretch the day into the night, but in doing so, it simply multiplied the number of eyes that stayed open in the dark. Even now, in the quiet hours past midnight, there are people awake in every corner of the earth, pilots crossing the sky, surgeons standing beneath bright lights, monks whispering ancient prayers, and dreamers who simply cannot rest. The night remains divided between those who sleep and those who watch, and in a way we owe them our safety, our progress, and our dreams. Without them, fires would burn unchecked, ships would drift astray, the sick would suffer, and cities would be silent in fear. The night watchers have always carried the unseen weight of civilization, invisible guardians of the sleeping world. But there is another truth hidden in their wakefulness. To watch through the night is to know its beauty, to feel the world when it breathes most quietly, to see the moonlight painting silver over stone and water, to hear the distant rhythm of life moving in darkness. In those hours when most eyes are closed, the universe seems closer, more intimate. Time itself feels different, slower, softer, infinite. Perhaps that is why throughout history poets and philosophers often wrote by night. They felt something sacred in that stillness, the space between thoughts where inspiration lives. The candle flickering on a desk, the scratch of a quill, the mind wandering while the rest of the world sleeps. This, too, was a form of watching. To be awake in the night is to bear witness to the quiet miracle of existence, to listen to the silence between heartbeats and know that even in darkness life continues. So, if you ever find yourself awake long after the world has gone still, if the clock ticks softly and the stars feel near, remember that you are part of an ancient order. You walk in the footsteps of countless others who have kept watch before you. The guards on the walls, the monks in the chapel, the mothers by the cradle, the poets by candlelight. You are one of the night watchers, bound by a lineage of wakefulness that stretches back to the dawn of time. And as you sit in the hush of the dark, know this: even the longest night eventually gives way to light. The horizon will blush with dawn, the birds will stir, and somewhere a tired watcher will close their eyes, at last allowed to rest. Chapter 10. Dreams and Omens. When sleep spoke to the ancient world, there was a time when sleep was not just rest. It was a doorway, a secret passage between worlds. The ancients believed that when the eyes closed and the body fell still, the soul wandered. It crossed the thin veil that separates the living from the divine, the earthly from the eternal. In dreams God spoke, spirits whispered, and fate revealed its hidden face. To dream was not to imagine. It was to receive. It was a sacred encounter. Across empires and centuries, people turned to their dreams for guidance, for healing, for warnings of what was yet to come. The night was not empty. It was alive, filled with messages from beyond. In the ancient world, dreams were as real as the waking sun. The Sumerians, among the first civilizations to write their thoughts in clay, recorded dreams on tablets over 4,000 years ago. Kings and priests spoke of them with reverence. They believed dreams were dispatches from the gods, messages sent through the silence of sleep. A good dream was a blessing, a sign of favor. A nightmare was a warning, a shadow of divine displeasure. The great epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest stories, begins and ends with dreams. Gilgamesh the king sees visions of a meteor, of an axe, symbols foretelling the arrival of his friend Enkidu. Later, before their fateful journey into the cedar forest, the heroes dream again, and the gods speak through the symbols of thunder, falling stars, and shadows. For the Sumerians, dreams were a language written not in words but in images, a code that only priests and diviners could interpret. The Egyptians, too, believed in the power of dreams. In their sacred texts, sleep was a small death, a moment when the soul traveled through the same realms it would one day cross forever. Pharaohs kept dream books filled with interpretations of symbols. If you saw a crocodile, beware treachery. If you saw a lotus, expect good fortune. Some temples, especially those dedicated to the god Serapis or Imhotep, were built for the art of dream healing. There, supplicants came not to pray, but to sleep. They would lie down in special chambers called incubation rooms, where priests burned incense and recited hymns. As the dreamer drifted off, it was said that the god would appear to them in vision, offering cures or prophecies. When they awoke, the priests recorded their dreams on papyrus and translated their meanings. The body rested, but the soul was in conversation with the divine. In Greece, this sacred art of dream healing reached new heights. The temples of Asclepius, the god of medicine, became sanctuaries of sleep. Pilgrims traveled great distances to these peaceful places, hoping that the god would visit them in their dreams. They would bathe in sacred springs, make offerings, and then lie down in the abaton. a dark hall open to the whispers of the night. There the boundary between the mortal and the divine seemed to fade. Many recorded miraculous dreams, snakes, symbols of healing, slithering gently across their bodies, the god Asclepius himself appearing in radiant form, touching their wounds and restoring them to health. Upon waking, the healed would carve their dreams into stone tablets as offerings. Even philosophers like Aristotle wrote of these experiences, pondering whether dreams might arise from divine will or the hidden workings of the human mind. To the Greeks, not all dreams were created equal. They believed there were two gates through which dreams entered the world, one of ivory and one of horn. Dreams from the ivory gate were false, deceptive illusions. Those from the horn gate were true, carrying messages from the gods. The challenge lay in knowing which gate one had passed through upon waking. The Romans inherited these beliefs and built upon them. Emperors, senators, and soldiers alike sought meaning in their dreams. Julius Caesar once dreamed of his own murder. His wife Calpurnia saw him bleeding in her sleep and begged him not to go to the Senate on the Ides of March. He went anyway. The dream, like an echo of fate, came true. Roman generals often refused to go to war if their dreams warned against it. Cicero and Livy both recorded tales of visions that predicted storms, deaths, and victories. For the Romans, the dream world was a council chamber of gods and ancestors, a place where the living met the dead in conversation. Farther east, the power of dreams held equally deep meaning. In China, dream interpretation was an ancient science. Philosophers of the Zhou and Han dynasties wrote manuals explaining how dreams reflected the balance of the qi, the vital energy within all things. The Book of Dreams by the scholar Zhou Gong, said to have been written over 2,000 years ago, listed hundreds of dream symbols and their meanings, a guide still studied centuries later. But for Chinese thinkers like Zhuangzi, the nature of dreaming itself raised deeper questions. In one of the most famous passages of Chinese philosophy, Zhuangzi tells of dreaming he was a butterfly, fluttering freely through the sky. When he awoke, he wondered, was he a man who had dreamed of being a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming he was a man? For him, dreams blurred the line between illusion and reality, showing that both might be part of the same eternal flow. In India, the Vedic sages saw dreams as a bridge between the waking world and higher consciousness. The Upanishads described sleep in layers, from light dreams to deep dreamless rest where the soul touched Brahman, the ultimate reality. Dreams were signs of the soul's journey, lessons carried from one life to another. A vivid dream could reveal karma, destiny, or divine instruction. Kings kept dream interpreters in their courts, and yogis practiced conscious dreaming, yoga nidra, to explore the hidden landscapes of the mind. In the Islamic world, dreams became a cornerstone of spiritual life. The Prophet Muhammad himself received some of his earliest revelations through dreams, and he taught that a true dream was one part of 46 parts of prophecy. Scholars, mystics, and rulers took this teaching to heart. Entire treatises were written on the nature of dreams, how to distinguish divine visions from ordinary imagination, how to interpret their symbols, and how to live according to their message. Sufi mystics in particular revered dreams as encounters with the unseen. They believed that when the body slept, the heart awakened, traveling through spiritual realms. The Sufi poet Ibn Arabi wrote that the dream was a form of revelation, a place where the soul sees with the eyes of the heart. In those quiet hours, the dreamer could glimpse truth unclouded by the distractions of day. Across Africa, too, dreams were part of community and ritual. In many tribes, elders gathered at dawn to share their dreams, interpreting them as messages from ancestors or spirits. A hunter's dream might guide where to set traps. A healer's dream might reveal the cure for an illness. In these traditions, dreams were not private fantasies but shared maps of wisdom, ways for the living and the dead to speak across time. In the Americas, the indigenous peoples also held the dream world as sacred. The Iroquois called dreams the secret wishes of the soul and believed ignoring them could bring misfortune. The Lakota spoke of the vision quest, a journey of solitude, fasting, and prayer, where one sought a dream that would define their purpose in life. Even the dream catcher, now known across the world, began as a sacred object meant to filter dreams, allowing the good to pass through and the bad to be caught and dissolved by morning light. For the ancients, dreams were not random. They were the pulse of the universe, the whisper of the unseen world. Only in the modern age did we begin to see them differently, as the mind's private theater, filled with fragments of memory and imagination. Yet even today, science still cannot fully explain them. Why we dream and what our dreams truly mean remains a mystery, one that continues to fascinate us, just as it did the Sumerians and the pharaohs. Perhaps dreams are both divine and human, mystical and biological. They might be the language of the soul, written in the syntax of the brain, or maybe they are the universe's way of reminding us that not all truths can be seen in daylight. Think of how fragile a dream feels when you wake, how quickly it fades, like mist in morning sun. And yet for a moment it feels real. You can touch it, feel its emotion, hear its echoes. Then it's gone, leaving only a trace, a question, a feeling that something greater brushed against you in the night. Even now, dreams guide us in ways we do not always understand. They warn us, heal us, inspire us. Artists, inventors, and poets have all claimed their greatest ideas came from dreams. From the melody that appeared out of nowhere, the image that lingered, the vision that refused to fade. Maybe that is why dreams still hold power over us. Deep within, we remember that once the ancients listened to their dreams as they would to an oracle, not with skepticism, but with awe. And perhaps when we close our eyes tonight, the same ancient voices will whisper again, not in temples or under the stars, but in the quiet chambers of our own minds. For thousands of years, humanity looked to dreams to understand life, death, and destiny. They believed that in sleep the veil between worlds grew thin, and that for a fleeting moment we could see the truth that lies just beyond waking. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, remember that you are stepping into the same sacred space that countless generations have entered before you. You are joining the dreamers, the kings, the healers, the poets, and the prophets, who closed their eyes not just to rest, but to listen.